All right, let's go. Let's continue on. And what I said was there's big surprises that are embedded in this kind of near future. And by definition, you don't know exactly what they are. I mean, they're surprises after all. But you've got a pretty good idea about what they might be. And I can say this because I wrote the book about it. you can't say that very often, but I literally did. I wrote the book, the first book about how to think about big surprises. And what you find out is that that surprises act in different kind of ways. In particular, in this kind of environment, you can get chain reactions where one keys off of another one and drives another one, and then you can get kind of synergistic effects where one happens and another one, and then you got a rumor and then a mistake, and somehow they all link together, and you get independent kind of wild cards, and they kind of influence each other, and then you can get systemic enablers like the internet, where if you didn't have things going so fast and the information moving around so quickly, it wouldn't kind of happen the same way, but you get these giant things and they connect because of the internet, and boom, something happens, and they're enabled by the environment. Okay, where did we just talk about the environment? You could do this with climate change, right? Because the climate change puts you into a space where things work differently, and what otherwise would be random things connect together, and people build vertical farms, right? Because they're trying where they otherwise wouldn't. And so surprises are really with us, but you don't know exactly how they play out because they could react to each other and drive and have a significant kind of impact. So now let me go through a list of some of it. Extraterrestrial disclosure. What you find out, and many of you in this room have been interested in the whole idea that there's life somewhere else off of the planet, and that they may be interacting with humans in some kind of a way. Well, as it turns out that if you follow the trends and you track it, what you're getting closer and closer to the likelihood that there's going to be some disclosure, some concrete kind of disclosure about that. And in particular, what happened about a month ago is this guy, Tom DeLonge, who's a rock and roll star that I never heard of. Blink-182. Yeah, I know. I don't know what that is, but anyway. And all these guys lined up at an event in Seattle. And Tom DeLonge, who has interested since he was a kid in UFOs and aliens, somehow worked himself down deep into the U.S. government. And this guy, Chris Mellon, used to be an assistant secretary of defense whose job was to be responsible for all of the black programs in the Department of Defense. Got that? This is the keeper of the keys. This is one of the guys who really knows. This guy, whose name is Al or something like that, he is the guy deep inside DOD, who was responsible for anomalous aerial threat analysis. You know what that means? That means tracking UFOs and and what do they mean? Let me see. This guy ran the skunk works for Lockheed Martin. Do you know what that means? That is his most secretive hardware production outfit in the whole defense thing, and that's where all the secret stealth airplanes and everything come out. That's who he is. This guy is a Nobel Prize nominated physicist named Hal Puthoff, who's been one of our speakers years ago at our transition talks, who is working on breakthrough warp drive and other kind of things, and works with these secretive, spooky guys. This guy, Jim Simeon, is again somebody from, I think he's the CIA or anything. Now, I don't, I know of Chris Mellon years ago we met, I think. Hal Puthoff is a great friend of mine. But they stood up one after another and said, UFOs are real. They are a significant issue. We've got to they shouldn't be classified in secret the way they are. We're going to start this initiative that is going to do education, and we're going to do science and research, and we're going to turn what we learn about into movies and other kind of media. Let me tell you something. This is a big deal. What these guys are doing, essentially, is fronting for a government disclosure kind of initiative. And they're not going to tell you the secrets that the government doesn't want you to talk about, but listen, there's nobody more credible and that knows really what's going on than this bunch of guys. Now, I don't know whether they'll be successful at it or not. I don't know what happened, but if you look historically and you look at things, this is a big blip in terms of this whole kind of space. And so if they break this loose, then it could be really, really interesting. Now, there's a companion issue in this thing, is because what's starting to come up from a lot of different kind of areas is the likelihood that there has been a secret space program that's been operating for years and years and years, where we've got very advanced technologies than the Russians and the other kinds of things. Jim McCarty, who was our speaker last month, Ra, the Power of One books, the channeling from Ra, from these things, in 1983, Ra said there is a mature space program where there are 350 ships that are flying, and the guys who were transcribing and receiving this didn't believe it. They said, impossible, that's crazy. And they didn't put it in their book. And then they finally put it in a later book. But what it appears to be is, for decades now, there has been this extraordinary kind of thing going on that nobody knew about, and that have been kept from the American people. Now you say, that's crazy, John. That's stupid. I mean, how could they do that? They can't keep all that a secret from us. You know what else I found out now? The people are digging into it and find out that there are somewhere a minimum of $14 trillion missing out of the government budgets over the last 10 years. $14 trillion. Now let me tell you something. You can build a space program like this for $14 trillion. You can run a whole different kind of parallel universe if you wanted to. Something really big is going on here that is starting to pop up, and it's coming up because of the internet. Because the internet allows these things to come out that otherwise wouldn't happen. You got the possibility of a coronal mass ejection out of the sun, where you could get a big, huge, everybody says, that it's time for that. If it happened, it would have huge impact on all of our electronics and the power system and the grid. You've got potential, I mentioned it earlier, but the decreasing magnetic field of the Earth and everything indicates the potential of an increase in volcanoes. This comes from Martin Armstrong, and he says, if we continue to get several volcanoes erupting in 2018, then it should be an active period and will contribute to global cooling. Our models of food prices appear to be rising after 2018 to 2024, which would tend to indicate we may be looking at rising in the volcanic activity in many places. So the global cooling could also be contributed from volcanoes. There's also earthquakes and such that come along with that. Then you've got changes in the structural way in which, the philosophical way in which we understand reality. Rick Parnas has written this marvelous book called Cosmos and Psyche, where he goes back all historically from way back and looks at how astrology correlates with major change, and it's just spot on all of the places. There's some marvelous, magical, giant kind of way in which all of these things are all connected together in these cycles and so on. And as these things come up, they start to change the way people think. And so this kind of thing could come to the fore. Then you've got guys like Anatoly Fomenko, who went back and looked very systematically and scientifically at our history as we understand it. And what he says is, They made it up. The Catholic Church threw in 1,500 years that didn't exist because they wanted to manipulate it in order to make it consistent with their theology. And you go, God, I mean, everything that we've been told about all this stuff may be suspect in some kind of way. Yeah, if it starts to work its way in, then you could find out that that's the case. And then you got things like this, where you dig out big skeletons of obviously some kind of giants and nobody understood. The point is that there's history here that are not part of what's taught in schools, and as this stuff comes up and becomes obvious, it starts to change the structural way in how we understand ourselves and how we think about and our reality and what we do. We're also on the edge of free energy, which is getting energy, electricity out of the sky. I'm working with it out of the air, out of space. I'm working with a couple of inventors who are doing that. And then there's Antarctic. Golly, this is wild and crazy. Antarctic, there are all these series and stories about the Nazis. Right after World War II, they took their submarines down there and they built things down inside and took their flying saucers that they had that were down there. And this is not just wild and crazy. The United States sent a task force, the Navy just sent a task force down there, and they got blown away, and they left, and they lost some airplanes and some kind of, I mean, this is real. Richard Byrd, Admiral Richard Byrd did this, and so there's something down there. There's something down there because John Kerry, on the day of the election, went down to Antarctica to see it. The Pope, the Russian Pope went down there. Buzz Aldrin went down there. I mean, this is all at the last part of last year. There's rumors that Barack Obama went down there, that Putin's been down there. There is something going on in Antarctica that is not, they're not telling us who it is, but it's something very, very interesting. Cliff High, the guy, half-past human, died down. Cliff High got interested in this and went to Google Earth and worked his way and started to blow this up and work his way around the coastline of Antarctica and found out that there were 6 little cities down there with airports, and that they were that clearly looked like that they were Defense Department kinds of operations, and that what they've been doing is standing up all this capability to do something that's inside of Antarctica. And what the projections are is that it's a new kind of energy source that is going to come out of it. And what's really interesting is that they found under 2 miles of ice, they found an alien city that's underneath there, and that and that's what everybody's going down to see. I mean, listen, if it shows up and it turns out to be real, that is a big surprise. Now, let me tell you how this works. Because guys like me stand up and say, yeah, look at this, blah, 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 blah. In 2007, I put this slide up. This is from Australia. Genetically engineered super mouse stuns scientists. Modded mouse can run nonstop for 5 hours. It lives longer, has more sex, doesn't get fat. It's also very aggressive. And what I used to always say is, yeah, and do you think that the Department of Defense isn't trying to make Marines look like that? Right? And it was kind of a throwaway joke. But it isn't a freaking joke, because then it disappeared and you never heard anything more, and that's the way it works, is they grab the things and they go away. And they start working on them. And so 2 weeks ago, Vladimir Putin, 3 days, it's a little more than that, October, Putin warns of super soldiers worse than nukes. This is the guy you got to listen to. If you go and if you think who he is what you're being told by the mainline press, you're wrong, because they're manipulating and they're trying to make him into the worst guy in the world. If you go listen to his press conferences, you will be amazingly surprised at how clear and reasonable he is. He warns students the day is fast approaching when genetically tailored super soldiers are unleashed upon the world, completely devoid of fear, pain, or fatigue. He said that such an advance would be worse than nuclear bombs. Let me tell you how this works. That's not speculation. Nobody like that stands up and says, yeah, it might happen. No, 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 no. He's talking about something that's in the works and that is coming forward. And in particular, he's probably worried about the United States and what the United States is doing, which is not to say that he doesn't have the same things going. And so what you've got is Star Wars kinds of things that are coming downstream. And he went on to say practical consequences may follow. One can imagine a man that can create a man that only theoretically, not only theoretically, but practically. He can be a genius or a mathematician or a soldier. I mean, who in the Donald Trump talk about stuff like, I mean, who else in world leaders has, you know, has the depressions to talk about things like that? A man who can fight without fear, compassion, regret, or pain. As you understand, humanity can enter, and most likely will in the near future, a very difficult and very responsible period of its existence. What I described could be worse than a nuclear bomb. I mean, this is changing the essential nature of who we are as human beings. And then this article that just came from this True News says that it used to be science fiction, but the U.S. is working on superhumans through DARPA, the Defense Projects Agency. The goal of these programs, I mentioned in Atlantic and Popular Mechanics and everything, is to remove fear, pain, fatigue from soldiers while adding strength and ability to survive massive blood loss. It's kind of like Star Wars, right? Those guys with the big white, the stormtrooper kind of things. I mean, it's like the movies is what's happening. So there's also these disruptions over unity, energy, levitation. I know people working on that. Room temperature, superconductivity, life extension, discovery of extraterrestrial life explosion, and innovation. Wow, the big surprises are kind of amazing here. So you get this cloud, so you've got Tesla kinds of breakthroughs and aliens and volcanoes and sun stuff and earthquakes and Antarctic and breakthroughs in science and technology and genetic modification and engineering and maybe even Starfleet going on, and you just layer on and add on to the middle of all of this stuff, all of these kind of things, and it's just mind-boggling what it could do. And you say to yourself, what do you do? How do you approach this? I mean, what is this about? How do you go into the middle of that? Well, there are two ways to which to do that. There are two really fundamental ways, and that's really important to this kind of a group because you've come here for a reason. You self-select, right? I know who you are, in a sense. And one of these ways to operate is based upon kind of, if you will, a philosophical, paradigmatic kind of notion of separateness. And what it says is that we are all fundamentally separate. And the question is, so what in the world is separateness? Well, it's what we all say. I mean, you're separate from me. You're not, everything's, cars are outside, they're separate. We're all disconnected from anyone else. That's what it's, that's the basis of all of the way in which our life is organized on this planet. All of the systems, all of the laws, everything is based upon the underlying principle that we're all separate, that we're not connected in any kind of way. And what that generates, of course, is all kinds of basic problems. Because in the face of all of that, what you get is this philosophic overlay. The way you look at this in a place of technology that is out of phase with government, which is out of phase with changing technology of the society. And it sets up a system where there are just crises all over the place because you've got this external and these contextual kind of things that are all happening. And you've got this mindset that looks at it a certain way, and you design the systems and the structures that will support that philosophic idea of mindset. And it's turning into all kinds of things: resource depletion, environmental degradation, government funding issues, jobs, geopolitical stuff. It's bunches of things. And there are some basic characteristics of this world. I mean, everybody here is familiar with it. It's mostly about physical kind of things. It says, you know, this is a physical wall, and it's competitive because, you know, if there's a limited amount of stuff and we're separate, then I need to get some, because if I don't get it, you'll get it or something. It's conflict-based and necessarily violent. Fear is the primary motivation and control. All you got to do is listen to the news at night if you've got nothing better to do than that. And you can see that's all about generating fear. It's a global oligarchy. It's a few number of people getting into trying to get in control at the top of this. The 10 to 1/10 of 1%. Values are all based upon economics, the legacy systems, the government, the education, everything like that are increasingly inefficient. You've got power and control, which is most important, and so follow this. So the system is eroding from the inside out. The controllers therefore need to maintain control. And how do they do that? They have broad spectrum monitoring, and so the NSA and all these organizations are tracking everything so that they can control and maintain control. And there's global reach weapons that then come out. You know, did you see Blade Runner, the latest Blade Runner one, where there's some kind of star thing out there, and things are blowing up. That's kind of those kind of things. And like the raw folks and the law of one people say, this is what about service to self. It's all the orientation is about how do you serve yourself. And so in practical terms, what is it? Well, it's clearly, we've talked about this, it's a world where robots and humans kind of coexist. But it's more like Ex Machina. Did you see that movie? It's a great movie. Where the robots really, I mean, when they're not exposed like this, that they really look like human beings, and you just really can't tell the difference between who they are. And why do you think that that's the case? Because already they're starting to do things like embed silicon chips down in embryo, and this is really big because if it was a nano chip, then it would really be smaller and you couldn't even see it. So then you grow people that are wired into the whole system, and like I said, Kurzweil says your brain connect to the cloud within 30 years. So inside your brain, you'll have these little robotic devices, and they connect with the neurons, and they figure out, because they got pattern recognition, remember, they're figuring out how to understand your thoughts. They got all of that, and then they connect that to the internet, because Elon Musk is also trying to install computers directly into human brains, and scientists now have invented nanotechnology to connect your brain to your computer, and you've got this marrying and this whole big system coming together in the cloud, right? The cloud, where it all is connected to the cloud. It sounds so kind of nice. Except, who's running the cloud? How does it work? It'll decide how you think and what you feel and what your ego and what your opinions and what your reality and your mental health. And they'll monitor. And that's where this is going. Literally. This is where this is all going. When you just run out the natural trajectory of where it's going. So it might turn out to be like the Blade Runner movie. Like you got this guy out here who doesn't know whether he's a human or a robot, right? Because it's so integrated and it's so certain. You know, the movie's all about him trying to figure out which he is and what he is. And you got wonderful, cool technology, of course, in this world, but it's a really different kind of place. And if you want to just carry that kind of Blade Runner thing, maybe it's a Blade Runner kind of world. And so the world for separateness is kind of a 1984 Blade Runner kind of world potential. You know, the Orwellian, George Orwell's book, 1984. You should read that again. My friend Gary, a psychologist, says every year he reads 1984 just to remind himself about how that's all about. And so I read it again this last year. I hadn't read it for decades. And God, you just go, wait a second. I see that all over the place. Yeah, that's where it comes. So that's the natural progression of separateness. There's an alternative, though. And that's the place where everybody in this room, now, like I say, you self-selected. That's where we're going, because that's about oneness, and it's about a whole different philosophical and kind of almost scientific framework. And it essentially says everybody's connected to everything. It's all part of all one thing. The greatest illusion in the world is the illusion of separation. That's what scientists, quantum physicists, and these Einstein and other kind of folks, some of those from the early quantum physics design have all said that everything is connected. It's all part of the same thing. It's all one thing. We're all connected in ways that we don't quite understand, but we're like cells in a human being, right? We're an integral part of the larger whole. We operate with some degree of kind of independence, but what we do is affects the larger organism. The Kabbalion, which is about Hermes, Trismegistus, Hermes, the great kind of entity from back in from Greek and in Egyptian times, says the all is mind, the universe is mental. This is all one big mental experiment. I talked to Great Braden yesterday about what he's going to come and talk to us about in January. And he said, you know, there's all these things coming up where people are starting to say, well, this reality is a simulation, some kind of almost like a computer simulation or something. Yeah, well, some say hologram, some say simulation. But the point is that it is all one big thing in some kind of way. It's mental. What the Kabbalion, what Hermes says is all is mind. And it is the mind of the creator, whoever, whatever that is. And the interesting thing about that is if you get your head into that space, and let me tell you, it's not easy. I haven't been able to fully do it. I can do it intellectually, but I can't internalize it. But if you do this, what you figure out is that the idea of oneness resolves all human issues quickly, because it changes who you are and how you behave and how you approach people and how you respond to people. Now, I've been to school to this. I went to India to Oneness University, and I spent 5 weeks with a guru, an avatar, who was all about oneness. And so I got, they tried to get me to fully kind of understand this, but I'm telling you, these things, by definition, remember, you're going from one era to another one, and this thing, it does not operate like this world, okay? And so when you're sitting down here or working your way up this track, you've got to unpin yourself from the previous kind of framework and the structure and all the things that they've told you and you've believed are true, and you've got to somehow make this transition to where you see yourself in the world in a whole different kind of way. But what's coming out of this is a genuine new world. Now, let me explain. There's some interesting kind of, if not science, certainly some close to science kind of ideas about what's happening here in this term. The Hindus have a very interesting theory that they, of course, don't think it's a theory. And what they say is that our sun is part of a binary star system. Now, what astronomers will tell you is that almost every star they see in the sky is a part of a binary system. There are 2 stars that are connected to each other, and they run around each other, and they're closely coupled in some kind of way. Now, it's not obvious to us that there's another one, but what it appears from irregularities in orbits and other kinds of things is that there is another kind of entity that is very powerful and big, and it's probably a brown dwarf, so you can't see it. And what the Hindus say is that the interaction between these 2 big stars means that what it sets up is this elliptical kind of orbit as one kind of system interacts with the other system. And as the as the one star gets closer to the other one, it changes the underlying composition and literally the physics of how things operate around, presumably the other one, but certainly this one as well. So the whole essential structure of the changes, because among other things, as they come toward each other, they go faster and faster, and as they accelerate, what these guys say, I gave a speech at a conference that was all about this binary star stuff out in California every year. It's very fascinating. But as they go around this relationship, the essential nature of life on this planet changes. And they call them yugas, and you've probably heard of that. And they have when they're closest to each other, they call it the Satya Yuga, and then they have the Treta Yuga and the Kali Yuga. And it looks like this, that the sun runs down like this, and this other one comes right in here. And as they get closer and closer, the basic operating kind of system of the planet changes. And they call the different eras, like I say, yugas, and they have what they call iron and bronze and silver and gold, and obviously the gold is cooler than the others, right? And what you find out is that as they kind of swing past it, when they're closest to each other, when they're going fastest, right? This comes accelerates, and then it turns and it decelerates, going out and gets closer and farther away. And as it gets closer, it gets that when it's out here in the golden age, when it's really close and it's going fast, and it has very interesting characteristics. And what they say is that the Satya Yuga, out here in this golden age, is occupied by yogis and mystic powers, and evil used to live on another planet. Evil was somewhere else, right? Which is why they call it the spiritual age, because it says that you're all in one connection with the all that is. And then they say, in the Treta Yuga, which is the second one, the demons live in a different country, but on the same planet. They're over off somewhere else, but there's an ocean between them. So you can see that the bad stuff is getting closer, right? And then in the Dwapara Yuga, the people live for 1,000 years. Here they live for a long, long time. Then they live for 1,000 years. They have good and bad in the same family. So now it's getting closer, right? Mm-hmm. And in the Kali Yuga, which is where we're just leaving, people live for 100 years, nominally, what we do, and good and bad is in each and every one of us. Now, how interesting is that? If you go back then into history and you look and say, well, where did the Egyptians go? What happened to the Egyptians after the Egyptians? Did they just kind of fall off the map? I mean, how did that all happen? There are big questions about these times as we understand it in history, and where there was great amount of development, then it went into the Dark Ages, and now it's coming back, and what's driving all of that? Well, if you believe this process, what they say is that, remember, as you get in close to the other sun and it's accelerating and you're really close, you've got these Satya eras, these yugas, then you have the Treta, then you have the Dwapara, and then you have the Kali Yuga. And starting at almost 12,000 BC, it started in a spiritual age. It works its way around to a mental age, which is 3,600 years old, and an energy age, which is 2,400 years old. And then 700 BC, here's the Egyptians and so on. They fall off the map because you get into the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. And then we're turning and moving out of it. We're coming out of the Kali Yuga and going to the Dwapara. Why is that interesting? Because that is 10,000 years of no war. That's 10,000 years of peace. that's 10,000 years of integrated oneness where people see themselves in a dramatically different way. It's an amazing kind of thing that is talked about in the Bible. It's talked about in all multiple kind of ancient documents. So there's a new world that's emerging. And the way this all happens, apparently, or maybe, is that Diane, not Diane Carroll, Dolores Cannon, talks about how that the imagery that she has gotten by way of a friend was that the third dimension and the fourth and fifth dimension are kind of superimposed on each other. And over this period of time, in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years or whatever it is, what you get is an opening and a dispersion, a breaking apart of the two, even though it appears to those who are on the old world that the new world is still there and everything, but there's some kind of thing that happens that we don't fully understand where it breaks off and there's a new world that emerges that operates independently, and it's in one place and another. And it's not like it's a different planet or something. I don't quite know how to effectively communicate this to you, but it's something different, you know, and it works in quite a different way that it then allows
fifth dimensional.
Yeah. And so you say to yourself, wow, that's kind of far out. How in the world are there any indications that suggest that something like that might be happening? 2 months ago, our speaker here was Mary Rodwell. Mary Rodwell from Australia has got a book called The New Human, Awakening to a New Cosmic Heritage. Mary Rodwell has interviewed 3,000 young people who all say that they're engaged and they're connected in some way to the larger reality off of this planet. But there's a couple quotes from her. This is a 4-year-old kid in the UK. He says, "Mom, you're my parents as far as bringing me into the planet, but my real parents are in space. I come from somewhere out there. Something of great importance is going to happen to this Earth. Not in our lifetime, not in your lifetime, but in mine. It'll affect," this is a 4-year-old kid saying, "it will affect all units of consciousness, whether they are mineral or vegetable or animal or man. It has to do with global consciousness, a vast change in consciousness, and that's why I'm here at this time, to experience this change." Wow, where does that come from? And then later on, he got older and he wrote a book and he said, "The light beings told me that energy was headed our way." That's like a cloud we talked about, right? And the essence of that energy was light, and the light would be a frequency that would repair our DNA. Wait a second, it's starting to sound familiar. They said it would make us more complete than who we are. This would enable us to have a different reality by moving our frequency. When this is, I don't know, but if I go with my feelings, I'd say it's just around the corner. Wait a second. God, this is bigger, and this has got bigger, more players and multiple dimensions and all kinds of stuff. Mary says the new humans are new generations of children and young adults who are intimately connected to galactic intelligence. They contend that they come here from star origins and they spread the truth of who we really are. They say that they're ancestors of humanity. That's what Cryon says. And they created us. They say that most of our species is still asleep, needs to be awakened to our true heritage and what we've come, particularly the new ecological and spiritually based technologies. Wait a second. So now you say, wait, then those guys from the Pentagon are starting up and going to open the door. And you start to see that, wait a second, there are all these kind of things that start to look like it's moving kind of in the same direction. Mary got a note from a guy who says, this is not as simple as just foreign DNA being put in. It's a combination of genetically improved bodies in combination with souls from different places in the universe, incarnating in these improved bodies. The souls have different frequencies and so on. and they play a different role in the activation of DNA. Wow, this is really interesting and big that we're in the middle of, that we're a part of this whole kind of transition. Roger Lear, who I met once, is now with us, says, I've come to the conclusion that there are not only star children amongst us, Mary would say thousands and thousands and thousands, but the entire human race has been advanced forward at a rate that is unlikely to be due to slow evolutionary forces, but far more likely that this is a rapid advancement in the species due to alien intervention. What the aliens say, tell Mary, people she talks to, is that, hey, this is old stuff. We do this all over the place. This is the way planets evolve. You know, you're just going through the same old thing. This is not novel. You know, it seems like a big deal to you, but you know, this is kind of the way it all happens. Which, if you kind of back away from everything, would kind of make sense, right? Because unless you think that we're the only sentient beings in the whole universe, which you probably don't if you're here. Peter Dunoff said, remember this guy from back in the 1940s and 1950s, a new culture will see the light of day. It will rest on three principal foundations: the elevation of women, the elevation of the meek and the humble, and the protection of the rights of man. Love, fraternity, that is the common base. How cool is that? So you say, where are these kids? Well, they have conscious recall of their experiences. They have minimal fears or concerns about being encountered. They accept their encounters with these aliens. They get paranoid, feel quite comfortable with it. They struggle with the density of Earth. They have difficulty understanding materialistic society. They feel human behavior is primitive. They really feel different. They have a sense of purpose and they feel connected. Wow. Again, back away and say, if you were trying to shape and drive and move a whole kind of species into a new direction, how would you do it? Wouldn't something like this kind of make sense? These kids they don't resonate with material lifestyles. Wait, what was that I said about the Generation Z and what? Yeah, it's all, they sense when others are, they sense when others are not being truthful. They're strongly empathetic. They function on their sleep. They don't hassle. They don't, they handle abuse. They age slowly. They succumb less to disease. They communicate with plants, animals. Wow, that sounds like a new human to me. That's amazing. It's kind of cool. Ryan says, by the way, it's just not the kids that are a part of this whole equation. It says 2015 was a recalibration for the way-showers from some of us perhaps in this room. The only reason for you to recalibrate your DNA is to stay here and be a way-shower. The light is winning. You will be able to help others to see the unique quality of your life. So it's parallel processing, right? The old guys and the young guys, right? And they're all kind of going in there, all getting changed in their own path. And what's coming out of it is a whole new world. Walter Russell, the great Walter Russell said, you will soon find yourself using the cosmic forces which you also cannot see instead of working blindly in the dark. Perhaps part of what he's talking about is science, and being able to use energy and other kinds of things in science. But there's a larger picture about what he's talking about here, is this engaging in the larger reality, what this is all about. So if you look forward and you say, if you bring all this together and say what might be on the horizon, here's what I think. I think that here's the way I come to this, because if you look out and you say, wow, there's a new world 15 years or 20 years from now. And then you look around yourself and you say, wait, and Donald Trump and whatever, and Netanyahu, and how in the world do you get from here to there in 15 years or 20 years or whatever it turns out to be. Something has to happen between now and then that reconfigures things, right? And I think it's a catalytic event of some major stuff. It'll drive us into a rapid emergence of a new world. It's hard to believe, even if it was evolutionary in that short period of time, that it wouldn't be seen as largely catastrophic or catalytic or revolutionary. It could be climate change, it could be some kind of technological breakthrough, it could be like blockchain, it could be financial transformation, it could be an energy breakthrough, it could be some pulse of energy out of the sun or something, or it'd be the combination of any of the thing. But we're into a period where almost by definition, if you buy this basic kind of notion, something really big is going to happen. It drives us all into a new direction. And this catalytic event will be facilitated, interestingly, by innovation enabled by the growing use of psychoactive drugs. Now, I don't have time to unload that, but there are very interesting scientists who figured out historically, and in all areas of life, whether it's plants or animals or humans, that when they're confronted and put into a corner and they have to innovate, that they reach out to psychoactive drugs, and that allows them to open out of the present to be able to move into the new space. Cows do this. I mean, this is all over. So then you look and you say, wow. Remember that weed, that marijuana leaf that comes floating in? You say, what's that about? Why does that come out? Because maybe that's part of this whole kind of process of opening up to allow people to see a new reality, that it works in a different way, and that it isn't the same way that it was in the past. So maybe it's overseen by leaders who are pragmatic. So they say, hey, if you like each other, if you love each other, then what in the world, why can't you be married? I don't care what color you are or what you look like. And the legalization of marijuana and so on. There's this practical kind of thing that's starting to emerge. And the process is that somehow we all overcome or we transcend the inevitable attempts of the old world clawing there, trying to sustain itself. And it will start with the clustering of new world people. That they're people like ourselves that start to get together, that start to see the world in a different way, in a very kind of organized way, start to say, how do we build something new? How do we operate in a different kind of way? How do we build the new systems? What's the image and the model and the vision that we have for a new world? The leadership will be pragmatic. The character of life will be increasingly open and innovative and adaptive. Because what I'm going to tell you is there's no fear in this space. It's increasingly interdependent, more community. And their pockets are communities of new thinking that connect to each other. The internet allows that. It's almost as though this capability is immersed in time to provide the interconnections and the fabric for the emergence of this new world. And the perspective will broaden rapidly because the internet will proliferate, so these new ideas will start to move out. And it will embrace an environment in more systemic and inclusive kind of terms because you start to see things in oneness terms, that you're connected to everything else. This is a relatively evolutionary perspective, not revolutionary. But revolutionary is what might happen because there isn't much time and there's a whole lot of change that happens between now and then. What Cryon says is, by the way, it gets worse before it gets better. That's what Cryon says most recently. That through about 2018, it continues to degenerate and then it starts to come together and head up. But Cryon says that the shift is from authority on the outside to authority on the inside. This is really important. Because what this says is you decide. You are this essential component of God. You are the essential piece of all that is. And you don't make you don't let other people make the decisions. And it says that the drama is you're going to react to drama differently. You know, you don't get all worried about what's on the news. And you have fewer children, and there'll be alternative ways to produce electricity. And young people will say, would that be fair? You know, and in both in finance and politics. And you know what I think comes out of the thing is a good news channel that that allows you to, on a regular daily basis, see all the cool things that are happening that are driving you into this new space. And right now, all we've got is everybody telling us how horrible it is and how it's all going into the toilet next week. And there are wonderful things that are happening. There are really interesting, wonderful things that are happening. What Ryan also says is that big pharma is going to fail, that it's structurally incompatible with this home world, and it'll be the end of the war. So Michael St. Clair, who wrote a book called Starseed, says that here's the timeline to 2050. He says that new social values are emerging. There's a period between 2009, 2024 is a vast test for humanity. And new social values emerging by 2020, science, establishment, and political house of cards perish because these existing structural institutions are unsustainable at the most core kind of base. They're based upon values and structures and ideas that are not sustainable in this new world, so they're increasingly unemployed. You move forward to a new network society by 2025, its constructive, peaceful attitude emerges. That's 7 years from now. Unseen force that gives rise to the physical becomes visible. This is science saying that the animating energy that provides life and so on, Cryon says that this is going to happen as well, will become visible. Modern people will manage and share the Earth's resources. New eon tons, and by 2050 we understand extraterrestrial intelligence and we apply it. Wow. I mean, you just look at that and say, man, the kind of change and the significance and who we are and what we get to play and what we get to do and who we, in the middle of all of this, is just amazing. There's never been a time in history even close to something like this. So what's this new world, oneness world look like? It's pretty cool. I called it a new world because I couldn't think of anything else but the sun shines over here. Sun shining over there. It's a really great alternative. And there are really good indications that say that that's where this all goes and who we all are and the role that we kind of got to play in order to help make that happen. So the question is then, how do you get from here to there, right? You have to learn to deal with extraordinary change. We have to be focused on the future and not the past, because the past is not what it's about. This is a new world that's emerging, and the old ideas are not going to work. And so right now we live in a world where religion and society and government and family and all these systems are trying to tell us who we are and what we do, and what's right and what's wrong. And by definition, they all go away in this new space. You know, you make your own decisions. The control, the fan, whatever it is, no control. You gain your power. You rise to the occasion of saying, what I believe and what my objectives and what I'm supposed to do are more important than anything else, I guess. You're not separate, but you're independent. It's important to keep some of these things in mind. And so, you know, keep calm, there's no problem. What? No economy, who cares? No fear, no harm. You know, it's not stoplights, it's traffic circles. You know, everybody takes their time going around. Do unto others what you would like others do unto you. Kind of sounds kind of religious, but it is. It's just kind of a nice way to live, right? Wouldn't it be nice to kind of live in a world like that? That seems to be the essential nature of what's emerging out of here. It's an issue of sovereignty. It goes to the notion that you are literally a piece of the creator that manufactured this whole kind of amazing kind of space that we all operate in. And that you have the capability and the power and the intelligence and whatever it is to do what you're supposed to do in the face of whatever is presented to you. It's free from external control. Dolores Cannon says, you have this extraordinary capability. Everything in your life you have put there. This goes back to the essential nature of how this all works. If you don't like what's happening in your life, you can change it. Now, wait a second. That is a radical statement, because what it essentially says is that if you can rise to this place where you have autonomy and you engage in the larger reality, you can literally change the essential nature of how your life and the reality operates going forward. There's this young guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, his name is Bentino Massaro. He's 29 years old. I have a friend of mine who is at a workshop in Sedona with him this week. And he is one of the most extraordinary kind of integrators of knowledge and information about this whole transition and how you adapt to this of anybody that I've ever heard and read. And he said, there's a recipe for happiness. The solution is to become aware of the madness around you and start intentionally choosing your own vibration, choosing your state of being, choosing what you believe in. That's like autonomy, right? That's like standing up and saying, I get to decide. The government is going to tell me this, though, whoever, whatever. Always choose where your attention goes, because where your attention goes, that's where your energy flows. You know about that? Consciousness is causal. Change how you think, how you intend. And then the reality in a magical, seemingly magical kind of way figures itself. It happens like every day with all of us for everything. But the notion here, remember, is about autonomy, about getting control and managing it and making it go where you want it to go. Alder Russell says, I believe every person can multiply his own ability by almost constant wordless realization of his or her unity of source. It's a mind shift that starts to say, I'm much, much more than I thought I was. We generate our own reality. We and the thing, people come to me and say, well, what if you go off in this direction? What are all these guys in the government and the NSA and whatever going to do? I said, they don't care. They're not going to care. You're going to be invisible. You're not a threat to them. There's a natural kind of defensive mechanism to this whole thing. Because if you go into this space, you resonate at a different frequency than they do. They don't get it. They think it's stupid, right? There's a wonderful little book called from a guy named U.S. Anderson. It's called 3 Magic Words. And what he says is you can change everything in your life, but you can just internalize 3 magic words. And those words are, I am God. There's some kind of a huge kind of transition that happens in your head, and it's not easy, and I haven't fully done it, but I'm telling you that I can see the outline of it, and that if you can get yourself into that space, you look at everything in a whole different kind of way. You're not dependent about all these outside kind of things. You have autonomy. You choose. You can make it happen. And Tino says, if you assume yourself to be at a very, very high level of consciousness, you will start to actually become that level of consciousness. Wow. He says, if you assume yourself, he goes on to talk about the fact that, and others talk about this. What's the woman's name? Esther Hicks. Esther Hicks talks about this. Stand up in the middle of the morning and drive yourself into this space where it's a higher frequency and you see this field is bigger, thing, and you drive yourself into a higher level of consciousness. And then if you can stay in that, if you keep visiting that throughout the day, what it does is it colors and changes the kind of patina of everything that happens throughout the day. But Patina says you will actually become that level of consciousness. You will be able to influence your timeline, not time, but your timeline, the kind of things that happen there to you. You will be able to influence the illusion of a timeline that you generate by going from this present picture to the next picture and so on. He says every time you increase your frequency, you see a new reality. And that his point is you can force yourself into that space. This is not like waiting around and having some guru tell you blah, blah, blah. You can drive yourself into that space. I happen to know that's true. I've got a little bit of a rough throat. It's mostly from talking like this, but I had what was starting to be a bit of a sore throat earlier this week. And I was thinking about this. And it had been around for, I don't know, half a day maybe. And I said, drive myself up into that space and open it all up. And the sore throat went away in 2 minutes. And there's something, I'm not telling you I got this figured out, but I'm telling you that somehow I'm poking at the edges of this, and somehow this all works. And that it by definition is a different kind of way of living and a different way to look at the world. And what Dee says is that higher consciousness is intelligent. It's not going to give stupid people the ability to go destroy the universe. It would go mad. It would go crazy. And so it's intelligent. It'll feed you what you need and what you want. If you don't have a desire for absolute joy to enter your life on all levels of your being, then you're not going to engender that. You got that? That's a huge idea. It says if you're sitting around waiting for things to happen and hoping that it's going to get better or something, that's not the way. You drive it. You say, yes, wonderful, big. And you put your consciousness up and it changes. If you don't have a desire for joy, you're not going to get it. You're going to generate the necessary frequency, allow you to consciously take care of your life. What he says is that the present is a byproduct of the past, right? What happens right now is all because of what happened in the past. So if you focus, as some people say, well, you have to just focus on the present, what you're essentially doing is focusing on the past present, the past. And what you got to do is focus on the future, because you don't want to focus on the past. You want something new. You want something different. You're not doing your duty consciously if you're focusing on the past by calling it the present. And then he does this assertive kind of thing. He says, if you don't step in and fulfill the role of living our lives, our unconscious minds will do it for you. Oh, Lord knows that with the news and everything else and the government, they're all trying to get a piece of you, and they're all trying to make it happen their way because they want to control you in one way or another. What it's saying is, no, step in there and fulfill your role of living your life. Are you ever going to offer and inspire improvement to the world by holding yourself back? I mean, think about that. If you don't get out there and do it, how do you expect to ever make a difference and influence this? You have to become something of vibrational and creational value before your radiance and your command of a universal abundance can be passed on to others. How can you tell somebody about something and not know about it, right? If you don't get out there and experience this and become this and become someone else, then you've got no basis for, it's all kind of hand waving and theoretical kind of stuff. This is really motivating kind of stuff for me, at least. The book Law 1 says, and here's the kind of decision point. Here's the decision point. Those truly hapless are those who have not helpless, who have not consciously chosen either the path of service to self or the service to others, but who repeat patterns without knowledge of the repetition of the meaning of the pattern. You just kind of go from one to another. This is a time of decision. This is a time to decide. Where are you going, what you're going to do? How do you play? Are you going to be a part of this whole thing? Ventino says, but please know that you came here to be worthy of creating what you desire. That's your sole purpose. It's almost like believing that whatever input you're generating, that you're getting given from the universe is reasonable. You know, you want a new Ford, maybe that's what you're supposed to get, you know? But I don't know how this all works. And I don't, and trying to, from a human point of view, make judgments about these kinds of things is by definition self-limiting, right? This is a bigger thing. So if you presume that the universe is benign and loving and is being helpful and that you're connected to it and you have access to all the information, all that is, and you want to get a Ford, then maybe that's a good idea, you know? Maybe that's a big reach, but maybe that's what you're supposed to do. So what you feel now is what you're going to attract, and what literally happens, apparently, is that when you get these ideas, there's tentacles or tendrils go out all over the universe that engage in helping to reconfigure the reality that comes in. And so, what is the kind of the basic notions about how you should live? I'd suggest gratitude, love, compassion, and forgiveness. A number of years ago, Diane and I were in Dharamsala in India, and we went and spent almost an hour with the Dalai Lama. First thing that guy said was the only thing that's important is love and compassion. And then he went on to say how he should be compassionate to the red Chinese because they were screwing with his land. He was amazed. It was amazing. I mean, we went out of the thing and looked at the Himalayas that are go straight up outside there and said, he's not from here. He's from somewhere else. I mean, he was an amazing man. But this whole idea of love and compassion and gratitude and forgiveness, I mean, it just goes, ooh. The kind of the energy in your life just goes to a whole different kind of space. You're not fighting people, and you're not, you know, in competition and all those kinds of things. If you ask me, that's the way to do it. Prior to Kabbalah, Hermes says, to change your mood, or if you want to change your mood or your mental state, change your vibration. It's a different thing. Feel bigger and broader. You can change anything, Crowley says. I mean, anything. So, Hathor say, the way into this is you be quiet and you look for miracles and you listen to the little messages that come, because the messages are going to come. If you lay in there what you want to do or what wants to happen or who you want to be or who you want to meet or whatever it turns out to be, it'll show up. Mary Rodwell said, this 9-year-old from Europe said, adults have small ears. They don't want to hear the messages we try to tell them. They don't want to hear what the star kids have to say. They're too stressed out, and it interferes with their reality that the adults live in. You really gotta listen. You need to be permeable. You need to let the ideas come in, because they'll come. They have a qualitatively different kind of sense of thoughts. And if you get to the place you recognize them. What I try to do is every time one of those thoughts come in, I do it. I do not even think twice. I just do it because I know it's going to work out all right. Because if you back off of it and try to handicap it and say, well, yeah, but then what, then they'll do. No, you don't. You just do it, because the more and more and more that you can follow that, the better, the more it is compatible with this whole kind of new world that's showing up. So we got to get together and support each other. We have to have an understanding about where we're going. We have to trade resources. There's a lot to be said in the power of kind of multiple people getting together rather than trying to do this just on your own. You should develop a vision of a global future, and you need to get youth involved in the thing. And the idea, of course, is to get yourself such that you're kind of on a rock and you're a bit of a lighthouse, and be able to shine this light and be able to show other people about what this is all about. So, it's all about no fear, and no fear, and no fear. If you can work yourself into the space where you remember, autonomous, I'm part of God, I got this, the idea is time. If you can get yourself in the space of no fear, you are almost there. That's it. This is it. That's the way you can tell, because if you've got all these questions about what's going on and everything, because you're depressed, you're living in the past, right? Because that's all about stuff that already happened in the past. And if you're anxious, that's fear, by the way. All fear comes from the future because you're worried about what might happen in the future. And if you're at peace with yourself, you're kind of living in the present, maybe leveraging yourself into the future. But it's an interesting kind of notion that says that I'm a futurist, right? And I'm trying, and the question is, how do you think about the future in any kind of systematic way and not get caught up in the fear associated with this kind of thing that's all coming apart in ways that you've never seen before? Well, you put it in your head and you don't put it in, you don't internalize it. It's a wonderful thing if you can kind of find that space in it. So what I would suggest to you, as you go forward into this space, is don't have confidence in ignorance. Don't presume that what you know or what you've learned or what you've come from or what's worked in the past or anything else is adequate to this new emerging new world. There's a tentativeness about all of this. There's this kind of, again, you back away and say, wait a second, I just got parachuted into Borneo and I don't know what this is quite going to be like, and I ought to be careful because there's, minefields or whatever that is they have over there. And so what you need to do is realize, by the way, that you probably don't know much of anything. If you, by the way, run that down philosophically, you find out you don't know anything. You got a lot of beliefs and ideas, but there's very little that you know for sure. And so I'll leave you with, remember the first law of Discordianism. Convictions cause convicts. Whatever you believe imprisons you. And going into this space, what you've got to do is be open to these new ideas, and you start to, because you're not going from here to there without new ideas and whole new perspectives. So that's what I've got to say today. Thank you.